Imagine you've worked your whole life, and now your body is tired, your mind feels empty, and you ask yourself, am I still worth anything? Yet the answer might be found in a single loving embrace. Opening that strikes the heart. Imagine you've worked your whole life, and now your body is tired, your mind feels empty, and you ask yourself, am I still worth anything? Yet the answer might be found in a single loving embrace. That question alone is heavy, isn't it? Because deep down, you've probably felt it at some point. Maybe last night, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., wondering why your energy has slipped through your fingers. Maybe this morning, when you forced yourself out of bed but every movement felt like dragging cement blocks. Or maybe it hit you when you sat at the dinner table and realized you didn't even have the strength to laugh at the same old family jokes. Here's the truth. You are not alone in that emptiness. Millions of people between 50 and 80 are fighting the exact same invisible war, not against aging itself, but against the creeping thought that life has lost its flavor. And the cruel part? Nobody talks about it. Society tells you to retire gracefully, as if your story is over. But what if your story is not ending? What if it's simply waiting for a new chapter, one written not with exhaustion, but with connection? Science already whispers the secret. Psychologists at Harvard found that people who nurture close relationships live longer and report more meaning in life. Not more money. Not more achievements. Just love, in its simplest form. A hug. A phone call. Someone saying, I miss you. It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But simplicity is where the magic hides. So before we dive deeper, let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you hugged someone you truly love? Not a quick handshake, not a polite pat on the back, but a real, lingering hug that says, I'm here, I see you, and you matter. Because maybe, just maybe, the energy you think you've lost isn't gone. It's just waiting for love to switch it back on. The fatigue of life after 50. Here's a strange truth. Your body after 50 often feels like an old phone battery. You charge it overnight, but by noon it's already flashing red. And no matter how many cups of coffee you pour down your throat, you can't quite trick it into feeling 20 again. For many people between 50 and 80, this fatigue isn't just physical. It's emotional. Work no longer excites you, family responsibilities feel heavier than ever, and the future seems blurry. You wake up and ask, what's the point today? And when that question keeps repeating, day after day, it starts to erode your energy like water dripping on stone. Science actually backs this up. Research from the National Institute on Aging shows that after midlife, energy dips are tied not only to metabolism but also to a lack of social meaning. In other words, your muscles may weaken, yes, but it's the absence of purpose that truly makes you feel tired. Imagine dragging a heavy cart up a hill. If you don't know why you're pulling it, every step feels impossible. But if you knew your grandchild was waiting at the top? Suddenly, the same hill feels worth climbing. I'm not saying you don't have reasons to be tired. You do. Years of stress, decades of responsibility, and the silent pressure to stay strong for everyone else, it adds up. No wonder sometimes you collapse into the couch and stare at the TV like a zombie. Your body isn't lazy, it's just asking for a refill, and here's the twist, that refill doesn't always come from rest. Sometimes you can sleep 10 hours and still wake up feeling like a truck hit you. Because what your soul craves is not only sleep, it craves connection, warmth, a spark of joy that says, life isn't done with me yet. So if you've been wondering why you feel so heavy, it's not just age. It's the silent hunger for meaning. And the cure is closer than you think. The science of love and health. Here's something almost comical. Your body is basically a walking chemistry set, and every hug, laugh, or tender word is like throwing a little cocktail of feel-good chemicals into the mix. You don't even need a pharmacy, you've got one built right into your brain. When you hug someone, your brain releases oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. It's the same hormone that calms crying babies when a mother holds them close. For adults, oxytocin lowers blood pressure, reduces cortisol, the stress hormone, and even helps the immune system fight harder. One warm embrace can literally dial down your body's stress response. Not bad for something that costs exactly $0. Then there's dopamine, the reward chemical. You know that little spark of happiness when someone says, "I've missed you" or "I'm proud of you"? That's dopamine doing its job, giving your brain a shot of energy that makes life feel less like a gray cloud. Research from Harvard's 80-year study of adult development, one of the longest studies on happiness, proves this point. The single strongest predictor of health and longevity isn't diet, exercise, or money. It's the quality of your relationships. People with strong bonds not only lived longer but also reported less pain, less depression, and more joy, even into their 80s. Here's the kicker: isolation does the opposite. Chronic loneliness has the same health impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yes, 15. You wouldn't willingly light up a pack every morning, yet millions of people are slowly smoking loneliness without realizing it. And the result is fatigue, illness, even memory decline. So the science is crystal clear. Love isn't some fluffy Hallmark card idea, it's biology, it's chemistry, it's survival. Your body was literally designed to thrive on connection. Which means the most powerful medicine you might ever take isn't a pill, but a person. Now the real question is, how can we bring this science down from the lab into the messy, everyday chaos of life? Because let's be honest, nobody wakes up thinking, "Today I need 20 milligrams of oxytocin." But you might wake up craving a hug, a laugh, or even a call to someone you've been avoiding. And that's where the magic begins. Small moments, big power. Picture this: you're walking through your house and your grandchild suddenly grabs your hand. That tiny squeeze? It's not just cute, it's therapy. Neuroscientists at Stanford have shown that even brief, warm touches can quiet the parts of the brain linked to fear and pain. Translation? A 2-second hug can be stronger than aspirin. The problem is, most people think big gestures are what count: expensive vacations, dramatic surprises, grand speeches. But in reality, your nervous system is a bargain shopper. It doesn't need a Broadway show, it just wants little signals of safety and connection. A 5-minute phone call with an old friend, a belly laugh over a silly TV show, or even a handwritten thank you note can recharge your brain like plugging in a dying phone. Think about the last time you laughed so hard your sides hurt. In that moment, you weren't thinking about your bills, your aching knees, or your regrets. You were alive. That's the power of micro moments. They trick your brain out of its dark spiral and remind it, hey, joy still exists. Researchers call this the broaden and build effect. Positive emotions, even tiny ones, literally broaden your mental horizons. When you feel cared for, your brain stops obsessing over problems and starts spotting opportunities. That's why after a heartfelt talk with a friend, you suddenly feel like you can tackle that pile of laundry or finally schedule the doctor's appointment you've been dreading. Here's the takeaway: you don't need to reinvent your life to feel alive again. You just need to sprinkle in these small, intentional sparks. A warm smile across the kitchen table. A silly text to your adult child. Even petting your dog counts. Yes, science shows stroking a pet lowers blood pressure 2.so instead of chasing big fixes for your fatigue. Try stacking small joys. 10 tiny moments of connection in a day can add up to more healing than one giant event once a year. It's like compound interest, except instead of money, you're growing energy, resilience, and a reason to keep going. And if you're wondering whether those little things really matter, ask yourself, isn't it always the small memories we cherish the most? A Story of Renewal. Let me tell you about a man named George. At 72, he woke up one morning, looked at himself in the mirror, and thought, I'm done. Not in a dramatic way, more like a quiet giving up. His days felt heavy. He'd stopped calling friends. He spent most afternoons staring at the TV, but not really watching it. Life had become a waiting room. One Sunday, his daughter came by with her little boy. The kid ran straight into George's arms, shouting, "Grandpa!" That hug was short, but something flickered inside him. A memory, maybe of when he used to swing his daughter in the park, or when his wife would laugh at his terrible jokes. For the first time in months, he felt needed. Later that night, George sat in his old chair, still thinking about that hug. He realized he had a choice: keep waiting for life to end, or lean into those small sparks that reminded him he was still alive. The next morning, he picked up the phone. He called an old friend. Just a 5-minute chat. But when he hung up, he noticed something unusual. The heaviness in his chest had lifted, even if just a little. Within weeks, George started collecting these moments. A walk around the block. Cooking a simple meal instead of microwaving leftovers. Sharing stories with his grandson. Each little act didn't erase his aches or his regrets, but together they built something powerful. Momentum. Psychologists call this the upward spiral. One positive choice leads to another. And slowly, without fanfare, George felt renewed. He wasn't chasing youth or pretending to be 40 again. He was simply choosing life, in small doses, every day. And here's the lesson: renewal doesn't come from a miracle cure, or some big turning point. It often comes from the tiniest decisions to re-engage with the world around you. That's how George went from feeling invisible to feeling alive again. Not if you've been drifting, waiting, or quietly giving up, maybe all you need is that first spark. One phone call. One hug. One step outside, because sometimes, the smallest act is enough to turn the story around. Science behind the shift. You might wonder, how can a single hug, a phone call, or a short walk really make a difference when life feels so heavy? It sounds almost too simple. But the science says otherwise. Our brains, even after 60 or 70, are not fixed. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to form new connections at any age. Every time you choose to connect, smile, or take a small positive step, you're actually training your brain like a muscle. Think of it as tiny sparks lighting up new pathways that whisper, "Yes, I'm still alive. Yes, this matters." There's another piece to this puzzle: dopamine. Often called the motivation chemical, dopamine isn't just for the young. Small wins, like cooking your own meal, finishing a short walk, or even hearing a loved one's voice, release just enough dopamine to lift your mood. And here's the beautiful trick: dopamine motivates you to seek more of those small wins. That's why momentum builds. One good act doesn't stay alone, it pulls the next one along. Psychologists describe this as the upward spiral of well-being. Unlike the downward spiral of stress, where one negative thought triggers another, the upward spiral works in your favor. A little joy makes you more open. Being open brings connection, connection brings meaning, and meaning feeds back into energy, and don't forget the body. Studies show that people over 60 who maintain even light social activity and daily movement have lower risks of depression, heart disease, and memory decline. In other words, the science agrees with what George discovered. Renewal doesn't come from waiting for life to change. It comes from nudging yourself into motion, no matter how small. So yes, that hug from a grandchild, that phone call to a friend, that short walk after dinner, it's not trivial. It's medicine. Not the kind you swallow, but the kind you live. And here's the takeaway: the shift begins not when everything is fixed, but when you decide to reach for just one spark of life. From there, the science and your own heart will do the rest. The hidden power of connection. Here's something no one tells you when you're young: the older you get, the less you need things and the more you need people. At 20, you chase success. At 30, you chase stability. At 40, maybe comfort. But past 50, what truly keeps you alive isn't money or titles, it's connection. Think about it. Loneliness has been called the silent killer. Researchers from Harvard found that chronic loneliness increases the risk of death as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Not because you're weak, but because the human body is wired to thrive in community. Our hearts literally beat stronger when we feel seen, heard, and loved. Let me share a small story. There was a woman named Maria, 68, who lived alone after her husband passed. She thought she was fine watching TV, watering her plants, keeping busy. But her doctor noticed her blood pressure was climbing, and her memory was slipping. One day, Maria reluctantly joined a neighborhood book club. She didn't even like the first book. But she kept going back, not for the reading, but for the laughter, the stories, the little hugs at the end of the night. Within months, her doctor was stunned. Her blood pressure had dropped. Her mood improved. And she herself said, "I feel human again." That's the power of connection. It doesn't just change your emotions, it rewires your biology. Connection doesn't have to mean huge gatherings or endless socializing. It can be as simple as one deep conversation, one regular coffee with a friend, or one shared laugh with a neighbor. What matters is that you let yourself be reminded, "I belong here. I matter." So if you've been pulling away, convincing yourself that you're fine alone, remember, isolation may feel safe, but it slowly starves the soul. Connection, even in small doses, is what keeps the fire lit, because at the end of the day, no one remembers the trophies or the titles. What they remember is the warmth of another hand holding theirs. Small steps, big shifts. You might think that to feel alive again at 50, 60, or even 80, you need some grand breakthrough, a life-changing event, a massive new purpose, a dramatic reinvention. But the truth? Transformation often hides in the tiniest steps. Science backs this up. Behavioral researchers call it the compounding effect. Small actions, repeated daily, reshape your brain and your body in ways you can't see at first, but over time they create a shift so big, it feels like magic. For example, imagine committing to just one short walk each morning. At first, it feels pointless, 10 minutes around the block. But after a month, your energy rises. After 2, your joints ache less. After 6, your doctor is asking what changed. That's not magic, that's momentum. Or consider gratitude. Not the cheesy, write down 100 blessings kind. Just one note a day. Maybe you whisper, thank you when your grandchild laughs. Or you jot down a single moment that didn't suck. Over time, your brain rewires itself to spot the light instead of drowning in the dark, small steps. Big shifts. That's the formula. You don't need to conquer mountains, you just need to move one pebble at a time. But here's the thing, when strength fades, love becomes your fuel. And love doesn't come from giant heroic acts, it grows in the simple, consistent choices you make daily. Choosing to pick up the phone instead of isolating. Choosing to stretch instead of sitting. Choosing to say, I'm still here, and I still matter. So if you feel stuck, exhausted, or invisible, don't wait for some miracle. Start tiny. Because a small step today can lead to a life you'll be grateful for tomorrow. That's the quiet beauty of aging with purpose, not burning out chasing perfection, but leaning into the small things that keep your fire alive. When strength fades, remember, your true fuel is love, connection, and the small steps you choose daily. Life's meaning isn't lost, it's waiting in your embrace, your laughter, your courage to begin again, even now.